Good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome on a beautiful spring day here in Evansville to the balcony at First Presbyterian Church and our splendid CB Fisk organ Opus 98, which is celebrating its 30th birthday this year, come October. We are in the season of Easter now, so it's time for some uplifting and exciting music for the season. And I'm going to start with two pieces from Langlet's medieval suite, Suite Médiévale, and they exemplify Langlet's style, modern harmony, modal things going along, lots of parallel fourths and fifths, and the first movement is called Prelude, and it's a thunderous introduction. Imagine walking into the church at Saint-Clotilde, or indeed here at First Presbyterian in Evansville, and you hear this going on the organ, you know you are in for something special. So, the Prelude from Langlet's Suite Médiévale. We welcome the buses also swinging by outside. You can probably hear that quite loudly. Now, we move on to the second movement, which would, in the sequence of pieces, prelude, offertory, the elevation of the host, communion, and the postlude. This is the offertoire, which he entitles Tiento, and it is going to feature some of the color reeds here on our Fisk organ. In the left hand, played up an octave, is the bass clarinet, and those pipes date from about 90 years ago when the Cassavant organ built an instrument here. And the oboe in the right hand also dates from around that time. Listen here for the structure of how he weaves the multiple voices in. There's two voices in each hand, and then the pedal comes in with a chant melody. But listen for how sometimes it's that way up, sometimes it's inverted and turned upside down, and it pervades the entire movement until it comes to an extremely gentle end on some different sounds. We will return to Langlet's Medieval Suite at the end of the concert for the grand finale. Now, next up is a piece called Flourish for the tuba, and it is by June Nixon. I'm just going to read you a bit of biographical information about June Nixon. She is one of Australia's best-known organists, choir trainers, and composers. She is organist, I believe now emerita, and director of music at St Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne, and teaches at the music faculty of Melbourne University. She's very well known, particularly down under in Australia. A quick shout out to my friends in Australia, including my brother and sister-in-law and my nephew. Hope you're all doing well. So here is her Flourish for the tuba. Now, for those of you who don't know, often the tuba stop is the loudest, brightest sound on an English organ, ordinarily on its fourth manual in the solo division. The tuba, normally in an orchestra, plays only very enormous bass notes, but I imagine that if you can imagine taking that sound on up into the stratosphere, beyond where a tuba can actually play, that's the sound that they're shooting for. Here we're going to use our magnificent French trumpet, which is going to be contrasted on the next piece with our German trumpet. It is very, very fiery and bright, and is going to be our solo trumpet today. So Flourish for the tuba by June Nixon. And if you want to hear that in person, come along on Sunday morning, as it's going to be the special music between our readings, just a short, sharp flourish of energy on the day that my colleague Jerusha over in the corner is going to be preaching for the first time. You don't want to miss it. Now, let's move on to a couple of chorale preludes for Eastertide. Certainly the first one is absolutely for Eastertide by Dietrich Buxtehude. You may recall that J.S. Bach famously walked all the way to Lübeck to hear Buxtehude play. And this is actually in an older style. Buxtehude maybe was imitating or one of his earlier chorales, and it's more in the style of Pachelbel from even earlier on in the 17th century. So we just heard our French trumpet, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I just played this on the German trumpet? It's a much more tubby, round sound, and from about the middle of the keyboard down, the face of where the reeds function is actually made of leather. So it's got leather facing underneath the reed motion. So, quite a different sound for this, but it's still kind of full and tubby. This chorale prelude is Jesus Christus unser Heiland, and a translation of the first verse is Jesus Christ our Saviour, who has overcome death and is resurrected, and has captured sin, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Next, another chorale prelude by Dietrich Buxtehude, not necessarily specific for Easter, but quotes, I believe, from the Gospel of John. "Come unto me, says God's Son, all you who are burdened, heavy laden with sins, young and old, men and women. What I want to give you will cure all of your troubles." The melody predates Martin Luther, from where we get a lot of these German chorales, dating from around 1490, and the text was written by Georg Grunwald in 1530. The accompaniment is going to be on the main principal sound, on the grate, accompanying a solo sound in the swell, made up of the flute and the fourth principal, and also the nasard, 2 2/3, so a mutation that sounds an octave and a fifth above the root note. And it gives us this kind of cool but yet bright sound that blends very well together. So, "Kommt her zu mir, spricht Gottes Sohn", Books WV 201. You might be able to tell as we listen to that chorale prelude, Buxtehude often writes in 4 voices, and he lays out the tune before it actually comes in with the ornamented melody. So one voice will come in playing the tune, and then a second voice, and then the pedal, and maybe they move it around a little bit, and then comes in the actual tune. And then each phrase of the melody is treated in that way before it comes in. Apologies to Buxtehude for playing some of the wrong notes that he wrote. So, you may also have noticed that the touch that I was using, it might have felt a little bit more spaced out between each note, just by a fraction of a second. And that's because, in general, our Baroque music works better to have just that little bit of daylight so you can really hear all of the parts moving between. So, returning to L'Anglais, a completely different mindset altogether. The communion service has taken place. The hundreds, if not thousands of people have experienced and witnessed the great ceremony, and L'Anglais is going to send them on their way with acclamations as the postlude. And the text in particular of these acclamations is specifically for Christ the King Sunday, but it's Christus vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat. And I remember singing this as a child, boy chorister at Westminster Abbey, and we would sing Christus vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat. So strongly singing those words, showing that Christ is in full glory at the end of the church year. But wonderfully suitable also for this season of Easter, in my opinion. So, back to L'Anglais, a full organ for a lot of the piece, although I leave off a few things to add later, and you will hear the chant thundering away in the pedals all the way through, and he layers texture upon texture upon texture. L'Anglais likes to take the smallest piece of information and multiply it out like a spinning machine. So you'll hear that coming back all the way through, sometimes turned upside down, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, and he creates also moments of great tension and wonder by building up to a huge climax and a big dissonance and then just letting go, and makes you wonder, what's going to happen next? Well, there might be another one, even bigger, followed by a third, or he may just fade it away or bring in a different texture altogether. So here's Acclamations from the Suite Médiévale by Jean L'Anglais. suppose you might not have needed the internet to hear that where you live. We can certainly hear it in here. Well, what a thrill to have you with me today. Music by Jean Langlais, June Nixon, and Dietrich Buxtehude. Join us in person via a reservation for a pew online for our worship services at 8:30 and 10:30 via the church website. Or you can join us virtually through the website and also on Facebook Live. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. Thanks again for joining me. Bye-bye.